Ghost Adventures just took the darkest turn yet. The wife of one of its stars has been arrested for plotting to murder a host on the show, but that's not where the craziness stops. She allegedly asked a convicted triple murderer to help her out in this alleged murder for hire scheme. She says she was in love with this guy too, who, by the way, she started messaging after she saw a true crime documentary about, because he murdered his family. This is Scandal, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Aaron Gillespie. Here we go, the top 9 shocking updates in the Ghost Adventures alleged murder for hire plot, and this one is spooky. And I'm not talking like, I'm a spooky girl, I love fall weather, sweater weather, I love PSLs. No, we're talking spooky like a woman who is accused of seeking the help of a convicted triple murderer to then arrange the murder of her husband, who just so happens to co-star in a show about ghost hunting. I don't know how we get more spooky than that. There's a lot happening here in this case, so let's start with the very basics who's involved. First, there's 32-year-old Victoria Goodwin, who is now charged with solicitation to commit murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She's out of Nevada. Then there's 35-year-old Grant Amato, and he lives in Florida, specifically the Okeechobee Correctional Institution. That's because he's convicted of murdering his family, his dad Chad, his mother Margaret, and his brother Cody. I'll let the experts explain a bit more about him. Here are some prosecutors from Florida.
But why? What was his motive? Why did he kill his family? The answer to that question lies and will be found across the ocean in Bulgaria and a woman named Sylvie, if that's her real name. The defendant, Aaron Amato, became addicted to her, consumed with her, possessed by her, to the point that he was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of the family's money on her. And when his parents found out about his, quote, relationship with Sylvie, and the tremendous amounts of money that he was spending on her, they contacted her and they let her know the lies that he was telling her and who he really was. And that effectively ended his relationship with Sylvie. To Grant Amato, that was the end of the world. There was nothing to live for. And he was furious with his family for ending his world, his life as he believed it to exist.
We've all seen TV shows. There's witnesses, right? Eyewitnesses, people who saw the crime. Well, we had eyewitnesses in this case. Margaret Amato, Chad Amato, and Cody. Those were your eyewitnesses. The defendant killed them.
Grant Amato was convicted in all 3 of those murders and sentenced to 3 life in prison terms. Put a pin in this. I promise this little explanation will make sense more in just a minute. But I've got to move on to the next big name in all of this, and it's someone you actually might recognize, Aaron Goodwin. He's a camera operator and paranormal investigator on the long-running show Ghost Adventures. It's been on since 2008. Here's where I'll throw to another expert, longtime viewer and first-time caller, Caitlin, aka my best friend and roommate from college.
In essence, Ghost Adventures is a show started by Zach Bagans, where he and his fellow investigators travel the world exploring all sorts of paranormal claims. They've done not only ghosts, but vampires, witches, aliens, skinwalkers, other like urban legends and paranormal activity. And they document any evidence they can find and see what, if anything, can be debunked or what is apparently real.
I actually hadn't heard of skinwalkers before. Actually, I'm just going to open a tab really quick on Wikipedia so I can read about this later when I'm bored or wake up in the middle of the night and can't sleep. I'm going to give it to Caitlin, though. She did a pretty good job of explaining Ghost Adventures there. This show has a pretty big following. For instance, their Instagram has 717,000 followers, so they've got an established fan base. And that's why it's even more of a shock that Aaron Goodwin was caught up in an alleged murder-for-hire scheme, and prosecutors say his wife is the one to blame. Aaron and Victoria got married in August of 2022, and from the outside, it looks like a happy couple. I mean, in January of this very year, he posted a picture celebrating the anniversary of their first date. And then in February, just last month, he posted another picture of her, calling her his Valentine. But things were apparently a bit more rocky than social media led us to believe. Victoria actually says the couple was having some problems and she was lonely, so she started talking to someone new. People magazine reports that Victoria was watching the Paramount Plus docuseries called Control-Alt-Desire about the convicted killer, Grant Amato. She apparently liked what she saw, so she reached out to him, as one does. So Victoria and Grant start this relationship and begin messaging on a contraband cell phone Amato had in prison. That is, until last fall. On October 3rd, 2024, corrections officers at the Okeechobee Correctional Institute seized a Motorola cellular phone number blocked out from inmate Grant Amato. Now, this is straight from the probable cause affidavit that notes Victoria Goodwin seemed to be planning a murder-for-hire plot. It all started when Grant Amato was found with this contraband cell phone. He's in prison right now for that triple homicide, so obviously investigators had to take a look through it. Analysts tagged a conversation between a female who goes by Victoria Candy and inmate Amato. Inmate Amato and Mrs. Candy discuss how much they are in love and how her husband, FH, so that means Aaron Goodwin, would not accept divorce. Mrs. Candy at one point states, "I'm so anxious, LOLOL. I just can't believe it's happening. Like, what the F? Like, how did I get to this point? Am I a bad person? Because I chose to end his existence, not divorce." In the messages, Victoria does ask, "Am I a bad person?" In which Amato told her she gave him his chances and told her she was not a bad person. He then asked why she thought she may be a bad person, and she replied, "Because I chose to end his existence, not divorce." According to the affidavit, Mrs. Candy, meaning Victoria, told Amato where her husband would be, a specific Best Western Plus in Barstow, California. It appears Victoria is providing Aaron's location, mentioning he was at the hotel per his Find My, which is a location sharing application. She also provided times he would be filming when going to the hotel and when smoking. Officials also say there was money exchanged in all this. Additionally, investigators found messages between Amato and Victoria discussing payments to PayPal, possible payments through Zelle, and Cash App. Amato asked Victoria for a $2,500 PayPal payment to an account and then another payment after receiving confirmation. It should be noted that your affiant has worked solicitation for murder cases previously, and half payment before and half after the murder is typical. As investigators are looking through all of this, they find another conversation between Amato and someone whose name has been blocked from the report. Inmate Amato also informs, name blocked, that he will distract the husband of Mrs. Candy with a phone call. Then he informs this named blocked, "He's asleep right now, in the hotel room. Brother, I need to know what is going on. Can I get an update? Was it done?" So eventually investigators are like, we have got to talk to Victoria, otherwise known as her alias, Mrs. Candy. Victoria was asked about her Facebook username, but she initially denied using Facebook. She was shown a text message from her asking if she should delete things from her messenger, and she claimed she may have been talking about other social media applications. Victoria was asked if she used the name Victoria Candy, and she stated she did previously, but has not used the name in years. At first, Victoria totally denied sending the messages, but later she admitted to it. She said the money wasn't for a hitman, though. It was allegedly just for cell phones. Victoria was eventually confronted about the text soliciting and conspiring to murder Aaron. She denied wanting her husband to be killed. She described herself of sometimes daydreaming of being in a different situation, but she no longer felt that way. She also stated she did not remember sending those particular messages. Victoria expressed her feelings of wanting to be without Aaron and with Amato to Amato, which she described as fantasies or daydreams. With all of these things put together, including payment plans, a location, anticipation, and nothing being done to stop this plan once it was in motion, Victoria was arrested on March 6th and charged with solicitation to commit murder and conspiracy to commit murder. She since appeared in court just this week, and it was short and sweet.
Victoria Goodwin, 25 CR 020105.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Brown on behalf of Ms. Goodwin, who's present in custody.
Good morning, Your Honor. Mr. Henry, please say.
Good morning.
Your Honor, this was set for preliminary hearing. Originally, she had invoked her right to preliminary hearing within 15 days. She's going to waive that right today. This was called off at our request, and we're just asking for a status check in 2 weeks.
All right. That's correct, state.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Goodwin, did you hear those representations put on the record by your attorney?
Yes.
And you're agreeing to continue this for 2 weeks for possible negotiations? All right, that 2-week date will be?
April 8th at 8:30.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Meanwhile, after news of these allegations first broke, Aaron Goodwin filed for divorce. According to the court docs, the views, tastes, likes, and dislikes of husband and wife have become incompatible to the extent that it has become impossible for them to live together as husband and wife in marital harmony. That there is no possibility of reconciliation between husband and wife. Throughout his filing, Aaron Goodwin asked for a divorce, but also alleged a couple of things. He alleged negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, assault, and false imprisonment. He's also recently broken his silence into all of this, posting on social media. Here's what he wrote on Instagram, quote, "Thank you everyone for all the love and support through this emotionally trying time. It has really helped a lot, and I appreciate you all." All right, I don't want to wait another second before we take a deeper dive into this because I have so many questions. So let's jump right to our guest. It's litigator Rich Schoenstein. Thank you for coming on Scandal with us, Rich. And I wanted to ask you from the start, have you ever heard of anything like this before? I mean, murder for hire we see sometimes, but the fact that we have a kind of celebrity, I mean, what's going on?
Well, I don't know. It's funny. Can I remember any murder for hire plots involving celebrities? Nothing springs to mind, but we hear it a lot where there's sort of a affluent person involved who is the intended victim. We've seen that kind of thing, and I think this falls in that category.
You're right, because he has been on this long-standing show since I think it was 2008 when the show started. So I'm sure he has something in the bank account. Do you think that could be some sort of motive in all of this? I know she mentioned she didn't want to get a divorce, but also we have a hefty bank account potentially that could lead to it, a life insurance policy. What do you think?
Well, if I was prosecuting the case, I would look at that. I would be looking at bank accounts. I would be looking at financial condition. I would be looking for life insurance policies. I'd be looking for any recent changes to any of that. Is there suddenly a life insurance policy in his name? But you think about that, what the evidence suggests is that she considered divorce and decided to get a hitman instead. Well, why do that? Why go that route instead of divorce? I think financial motivation would be one of the main reasons you could come up with.
You brought up something that is black and white right there in the court documents, that she says she chose not to have a divorce. She chose to end it, or she intended to do all of that. That to me is, like I said, black and white right there in the text messages. I mean, how damning is that?
Well, that is the case from what I know of it so far, because I don't know if there's other evidence. I read the declaration in the arrest report and some of the reporting, and the texts that were found in the guy's phone that he had in prison, I guess contraband in prison, he has his own cell phone. Those texts indicate that she was involved in this, and also indicate, she says at one point, right, does it make me a bad person? I've decided to order a hitman. Does that make me a bad person?
Order one like you're ordering a pizza or something.
Yeah, it's the kind of question that answers itself if it's true. But that is the case, that she's got these communications back and forth with this guy that make it appear that she's involved.
To me, they are very incriminating, like what you're saying. It does appear straight away she is involved in all of this. And that gets me wondering about any sort of defense that she could have, because we do have these text messages.
Well, so think about it this way. The first line of defense in a case like this is always reasonable doubt. The first line of defense is, can the prosecution really prove their case? Because I don't know what else they have. Like, I don't know if any money actually changed hands. I don't know if there's a motive case, as you suggested. You don't need motive to prove murder, but it helps. I don't know if there is a motive case. I don't know the extent of this relationship with this prisoner. So there's a lot there that we don't know. And in a murder for hire situation, part of the point of hiring somebody to do it is that they might get caught and you won't. That's the whole point of the arrangement, other than you might not have the stomach to do it yourself. But so I don't know what else is there to prove it.
Does that mean you think that there's discovery ahead? Because we are kind of early in all of this. It apparently happened when they were going to carry out this murder for hire situation back in October when the phone was found. And I want to go back to the inmate too, because that's a wild loophole down all of that. We'll talk about him in a minute. But anyway, this apparently happened back in October. The arrest happens in March, but it's still kind of early on. I'm thinking, is there more discovery ahead?
I would think so. I mean, usually the investigators don't stop just because charges are brought. They're still looking into it. They'll talk to other witnesses, acquaintances who knew the couple. They'll find out more about the marriage. For example, has she ever said anything to anybody else about wanting to end it with her husband or wanting to end her husband? But part of the point I was making about reasonable doubt is, if all of the evidence is these texts, I assume one thing her lawyer might argue is that it was just fantasy talk. She was just engaging in, I mean, it's almost a form of sexting. She had this guy, she was interested in him, the marriage had problems, and this is basically a fantasy. She wasn't really ordering anybody to try to kill anybody. And by the way, the charge is only attempted murder because he wasn't in fact killed, which might make it even harder to prove.
It's interesting that you said sexting, because as I was going through and writing notes for this and taking a look at my script, I started to write that because it kind of did seem like that they were building this relationship together. I'm talking about our defendant here, Victoria Goodwin, and then of course, convicted murderer Grant Amato. And it seems like they had this long-standing relationship where they were apparently in love, or they thought that they were in love. So I think that does kind of check out. And this part is so weird to me. I've never heard of anything quite like this. The fact that she saw a true crime documentary about him and then wrote to him. I mean, I've seen that, like, for instance, the Wade Wilson situation. We saw a lot of people writing in, but then enlisting this man to help murder her husband, allegedly. I mean, that, I guess he's an expert because he's been convicted in murder. Like, where's the logic?
Well, the interest in the convict is nothing new. We see that all the time. You mentioned Wilson. Alec Murdoch gets fan mail or
Which
mail
is crazy.
Which is totally crazy, right? These are people accused of killing their wives who are in prison and are getting letters of interest because there's somebody for everybody, as you know. So it's not that unique that she would write to him. This part where then it turns into potentially a murder for hire business relationship, that is unique.
I'm wondering about the cell phone too. I know we talked about this a bit before with the text messages because that's the evidence we know, but it was found inside the prison, as you said, contraband, because these inmates aren't allowed to have cell phones. So he must have been hiding it for some time when they were going back and forth and messaging, texting, whatever it was. To me, I'm like, why would you do that? Because you know when you're in prison, if you're on a call, it's going to be recorded. Your mail, your physical mail is going to be checked through. And then if this is found, people are going to read your text, go into your search history, all of that. So why write it all down?
Well, I obviously you don't think it's going to be found. You think you're going to successfully hide this phone, or if you need to, you're going to destroy it. Or maybe you're not thinking about it being evidence. Because I will tell you that ordinary people don't always realize that everything they do with one of these is evidence. They don't realize how many cases have we seen that rely on text messages because people didn't understand they live forever. Even if you delete them on your phone, they might live forever somewhere else. So that's an ordinary person can totally overlook that that's a risk whenever you write something down. If you write it down in an email, if you write it down in a text, you're better off sending somebody a letter by mail because they can tear it up, right? That doesn't necessarily leave a personal record. So he's a prisoner. He's got a phone that he's not supposed to have that is illegal. It's against the prison rules. He's not thinking he's going to be caught, and he's not thinking about the text. I can't imagine why you would text something you have to know is incriminating to a prisoner.
I absolutely agree with you. And you were talking about like how many cases have we covered? And I feel like it's almost all the cases. The fact that we have phones now and you can go through, and it's just a PSA to anyone. If you've ever texted anything, it's just out. Sometimes when I'm texting my friends, I'm like, if this is subpoenaed, like this would be a weird thing to testify about. Maybe that's because I'm in the legal side of things. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's always out there. I do wonder though, if he is more brazen, more careless, because he's already sentenced to 3 life sentences without possibility of parole. So he's in prison and he's just going to stay there. So is it possible that he's just like, I don't care? I mean, could he even face charge? I know he could potentially face charges, but would they even charge him because he's already kind of behind bars?
Right. So one of the things you worry about with a person like that is there's absolutely nothing holding them back from further breaking the law. Breaking a rule about phones is nothing. What's the worst thing that's going to happen to them? They're going to take the phone away. Having some sort of interaction with the outside, being involved in committing crimes that are on the outside, that actually might be appealing to somebody in that situation. That's part of why they have the rule about the cell phones. That's part of why we don't let those kind of prisoners be in regular unsupervised conduct with the outside world, because we assume they're still going to be able to perpetrate crimes.
It almost sounds like he has nothing to lose. The fact that he's already been convicted and he is in prison for life. So that's maybe potentially part of it. But the female defendant in all of this, Victoria Goodwin, she has kind of a lot to lose. The only thing I'm thinking, if I'm her defense attorney, that is positive is that she isn't charged with murder. It's just conspiracy to commit murder, because thankfully the subject of all of this, Aaron Goodwin, is still alive. But that still could be a lengthy sentence potentially. What do you make of all of that?
Yeah, that could be a long. I mean, I don't think she would get life without chance of parole for conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. I don't think it would be that severe, but it could be a few decades in jail. Definitely could be a life-altering sentence if she's convicted. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are discussions about a plea deal.
I mean, it is really serious. Thankfully, this man was not murdered at all, Aaron Goodwin. But the fact that she was going through, they were talking about dates, time, money, all of that, like, it's scary. It's really scary. So I do agree with the fact that this is a really serious charge. As for him, though, Aaron Goodwin, I can't even imagine what he's going through in his mind, like the trauma that he potentially has because of all of this, in that it was his wife who was plotting all of this. Do you think investigators are talking to him too?
Oh, well, they're certainly talking to him because he would be a source of a lot of the evidence. I mean, immediately you have to know, what was the marriage like? What was she like? Did she ever do anything like this before? Has she ever threatened you? Are there other people she may have been in contact with that that she might have pursued this, right? Is this the only conduit to a hitman she had, or did she talk to somebody else? So he would be extensively questioned about this. And I assume it's devastating. I mean, you married a person and they want to pay $11,000 to have you killed, which, by the way, is not, I was surprised at the amount of money, because to me, that job is a higher money job.
I mean, that's the most severe sort of charge you can face, is murder. I was texting my friend about this case, Caitlin, and she was like, wait, how much was it? I think that's what everybody's saying, $11,000. That literally does not make sense. He
Yeah.
did file for divorce, though. That part to me does make sense. I haven't read as many divorce complaints or motions filings, whatever it may be, court docs, because I usually read criminal side of things. But it was interesting to me that a couple of things were pointed out. So not only divorce, but he also cited negligence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Is this something we often see in divorce proceedings?
So I don't do divorce law, and I certainly don't do Nevada divorce law. I don't know if there's some requirement in terms of alleging fault in the divorce proceeding in the state of Nevada, if you have to do it that way. He filed after learning about this plot, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it does seem to me the first thing you would do is file for divorce. And what you want, I think, is the quickest path to a divorce. And so if I was counseling him in that regard, I mean, I would tell him to get a divorce lawyer, but the divorce lawyer would say, it's not so much does the pleading say everything it has to as what is the quickest path to divorce. And I don't know, what their issues are, if they have joint property, if he made money while they were married, if he's concerned about the distribution of assets. That's another reason you put fault in there, because you don't want to have to hand the woman who arguably tried or allegedly tried to have you killed half of your assets.
That part makes sense to me. The filing, all of it, the timeline after he found out. I guess I just was wondering about it because it seemed to me almost like a civil complaint. And I'm wondering if he has any grounds for that too, that potentially he could file her he could sue her rather in civil court.
Yeah, I think he probably could sue her in civil court for. I'd have to think about what the claims are, because he wasn't actually killed.
Do you think it could be the same thing, intentional infliction of emotional distress?
Yeah, I mean, so in a death case, you would sue her for wrongful death, or something like that, or an intentional tort. You could sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress. I think you could probably do that in the civil arena outside of the divorce context. I don't know why you would. Like, unless she has significant assets of her own outside of the marriage, it would be pointless to sue her in a civil proceeding, because even if you win, what does it get you? The only point is to do it in the divorce proceeding, where you are dividing up your assets and there's a consequence to what you allege and prove.
It does kind of sound like he's hoping to divide things equally. I guess civil lawsuits are just on my brain covering Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, and P. Diddy, so I'm always thinking civilly. This case, though, crazy. We're covering this as a criminal case. I want to be specific about that, too. I guess we're going to have to follow it and see where it goes. Unclear what's ahead. Rich Schoenstein, thank you so much for coming on with us, though, and breaking it all down.
Thank you for having me. Congratulations on the new show.
Thank you.
I see it's doing great, and I'm really glad to be on with you.
It's so fun. We'll definitely have you back on. Right now, Victoria Goodwin is being held in the Clark County Detention Center in Nevada on $100,000 bond. She's due back in court soon, though, on April 8th, so we'll check in for updates around then. As for today, that's all we have for Scandal. I'm your host, Sierra Gillespie. See you next time.